The storm arrived with a ferocity that even the most seasoned sailors of Angler's Reach had never seen before. It wasn't just a weather system, it felt as though the storm had a life of its own. The waves crashed against the jagged cliffs with an unnatural intensity, the salt-laden winds howling as though they were crying out in pain. It was a tempest that seemed to rise from the very depths of the earth itself, as if something deep within the ocean had stirred, awakened, and was now ragefully demanding its due. The sky above had turned a peculiar shade of dark, sickly gray, where clouds twisted and churned in unnatural patterns, blocking the sun entirely. The people of the coastal town Angler's Reach were no strangers to storms, but this was different. There was something in the air, an almost tangible weight of foreboding, as though the storm was not merely a product of nature but something far more malevolent. A forgotten force, ancient and vast, was at play, and its reach was extending over the town, suffocating it, drowning it in its oppressive presence. Dr. Evelyn Kane, a marine biologist with a particular interest in unusual marine life, had heard the rumors about Angler's Reach long before she decided to make her way to the village. She had heard whispers about strange disappearances, about sailors who had ventured out to sea only to never return. The village itself, isolated at the very edge of the world, was known for its eerie quietness, and its people, those who remained, spoke of a deep, unshakable dread that lingered over the area, a lingering feeling that the ocean itself was watching them, waiting for something. The more Evelyn heard about it, the more she felt the inexplicable pull to see it for herself. She had come to study the unique marine life that supposedly thrived in the waters around Angler's Reach, where ancient, uncharted depths supposedly hid the largest fish and the most dangerous creatures. But when her boat finally docked at the desolate port of Angler's Reach, something struck her immediately: the silence. The storm had caused the town to fall into a hollow, unnatural quiet. There were no seagulls screeching above, no fishermen shouting orders to one another, no children running through the streets. It was as if the life had been sucked from the town entirely, leaving only the hollowed-out shells of buildings and empty streets. Even the wind had died down, leaving nothing but an eerie stillness. Evelyn made her way through the town, the faint smell of salt and decay permeating the air as she moved. The buildings, many of which had been abandoned long ago, sagged beneath the weight of their age, their paint peeling and windows dark and broken. Every few steps she would encounter another villager, their faces gaunt and hollow-eyed, as though they were sleepwalking through their own lives. They moved quickly, avoiding her gaze as if they feared that looking directly at her might bring some terrible misfortune. No one spoke to her. It was as though she wasn't truly there. But even as she walked through the desolate streets, Evelyn could hear it, the faint scraping noise that seemed to emanate from the very earth beneath her feet. It started out as a whisper, something she could easily dismiss as a trick of the wind, but as she walked further into the town, the sound grew louder. It was a rhythmic, unyielding scraping, as if something were slowly, deliberately dragging itself across the earth. She tried to follow the sound, but every time she thought she was getting closer, it seemed to shift, growing fainter, only to return with even more intensity from another direction. After a few hours of wandering, Evelyn found herself standing at the door of the local tavern, hoping to gather information from the remaining townsfolk who still dared to come out. The tavern was dimly lit, with a thick haze of smoke hanging in the air, and it smelled of stale alcohol and something else, something foul. The few patrons inside looked half dead, as though they were not just tired but broken, as though the weight of whatever haunted this town had robbed them of their will to live. They muttered to one another in low voices, speaking in a language she couldn't understand, and when they saw her, they grew unervingly quiet, as though her very presence was unwelcome. The bartender, a man with a face weathered by too many years at the mercy of the sea, looked at her with wary eyes. She asked him about the strange noises she had heard, about the disappearances of the sailors, but his response was nothing more than a low mutter, his hands shaking as he wiped the counter. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice strained. "There's things out there in the water, things beneath the waves. Things that have been here since before we came. And if you keep asking questions, you'll hear them too." His words sent a chill through her, but when she pressed him further, he simply shook his head and went silent, his gaze shifting nervously toward the window, as though expecting something to be watching them from the dark. Determined to uncover the truth, Evelyn set out the next day to visit the docks. The storm had lessened, but the sea was still turbulent, churning violently as though it were angry at her intrusion. The scraping sound, which had grown louder the night before, was now unmistakable. It was coming from the water itself. It was a low, rhythmic noise, as though something heavy was being dragged along the seabed, something massive, something alive. Evelyn stood at the edge of the dock, staring out into the swirling water, the ocean now eerily calm and black as pitch beneath the overcast sky. Shapes moved in the depths, monstrous and shifting, their outlines impossible to define, and yet she could feel them there, watching her, waiting for her to make the first move. But just as quickly as they had appeared, the shapes vanished, and the water settled back into an unnatural stillness. The scraping noise stopped as though it had never been there at all. Evelyn found a local fisherman who was willing to speak, an old man with a trembling hand who seemed to be haunted by something he had seen in the depths. His story was chilling. Angler's Reach, he said, had been built on an ancient pact, a pact made centuries ago by the founders of the town with something far older than the land itself. The creature in the water, the one that had haunted them for generations, had once been appeased by offerings, sacrifices made to it by the people who had lived there. The town had prospered for a time, the fish growing larger and more abundant, the waters becoming rich with life. But as the years passed, the sacrifices had become more frequent, more violent, as the creature grew hungrier. The last time they had tried to appease it, the fishermen had not returned. The people had abandoned the town, fleeing in terror from the thing that lived beneath the water. But the thing had never truly gone. It had waited, and now it was awake again. With this new knowledge, Evelyn realized with growing horror that the storm wasn't just an act of nature. It was a signal. The creature beneath the water had awakened, and it was calling to her. The ground beneath her feet trembled, the water around the dock beginning to churn once more as the ocean seemed to come alive with the hunger of something ancient. The scraping sound grew louder again, unmistakable and relentless, as if something was pushing against the shore, something vast, something ancient. Evelyn could feel its presence rising from the depths, pulling her toward it. As she stood there, frozen, the water surged toward her, and she saw the shape of something enormous, something incomprehensible, rising from the depths. It was a presence beyond human understanding, its very existence bending the laws of nature, warping reality itself. Her body froze in place, her heart pounding in her chest as the tendrils of the creature reached for her. The sea roared as it surged around her, and in that moment, Evelyn knew she was doomed. There was no escape from the depths, no way to outrun the hunger that had been waiting for centuries. As the water pulled her under, she felt the last of her sanity slip away, consumed by the creature's ancient whispers. If you've survived the terror, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join the Nightmare Vault family. There's more cosmic horror, eldritch beings, and nightmarish stories waiting just around the corner. Like, comment, and share your thoughts. What's the most terrifying thing you've encountered in the void? Keep your eyes open and remember, the nightmare is always watching.